Okay, so it's starting now. Yeah, I think we are live. Okay, so good morning, everybody. We are live at this point on Facebook as well. So, first of all, Eid Mubarak to all our participants and all the family members, friends, and well-wishers. It's an honor for us to invite at this point Shri Comrade Sitaram Yechury ji on behalf of Global Indian Progressive Alliance, which is a grassroots organization that stands for bringing people together towards building progressive communities with dedicated members represented by academicians, researchers, political, civic, and corporate leaders, grounded in scientific, evidence-based research, driven in the pursuit of facts, liberty, rationality, advocacy, and social justice. We are also pleased to be joined by our gracious partners, Hindus for Human Rights, led by Raju Rajgopal and Sunita Vishwanath. And at this point, I will welcome them aboard as well and request them to introduce their organization to our fellow members.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, Sitaramji. This is Raju Rajagopal.
Thank you.
I am a co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights, a recently formed organization in the US to provide a space for alternate Hindu voices standing up for the human rights of minorities, not only in the US, but in India and elsewhere. And we are very, very grateful for your appearance today. And it's a pleasure to join GIPA in bringing voices such as yourself to an American audience. And I also want to extend my Eid Mubarak to everyone here and their families. And we are looking forward to hearing you. Just as a personal note, I had a pleasure of meeting with you very briefly in Shabnam Hashmi's office, long time ago.
Oh, okay.
When her office was in your compound, and I still remember
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So I just wanted to add before turning it over to my colleague Som here, as an organization, we've been deeply committed to India's foundational values, and we have found that many overseas Indians pan globally, have been deeply anxious and notably worried about the state of affairs in India, given the existing realities of the current political climate. We've seen a rise in the imprisonment of political and social activists. The Citizenship Amendment Act happened, which added a global concern and also impacted India's image as a religiously intolerant country. With recent Islamophobic narrative from India being called out in the Gulf countries, we also found that decades of political institutions that embraced those inclusive values are also now at the verge of losing their sheen, which makes us deeply concerned. So that is what kind of got into the background of us thinking about, finding a prominent voice, a thought leader in our opposition, political realm. And that's how our colleague Som here reached out. And at this point, I would let him introduce our keynote speaker, and we will go with that flow. Thank you very much. Som, over to you.
Good morning in US and good evening in India. Red salute to Comrade Sitaram Yechury.
Salute. Thank you.
So we are very
salute, is it?
Yeah. So, we are very fortunate that today we got Comrade Sitaram Yechury as our guest. I don't know where to start. Comrade Yechury is the General Secretary of Communist Party of India Marxist since 2015 in 2 consecutive terms. Comrade Yechury joined Student Federation of India in the year 1974 while pursuing his PhD in Jawaharlal Nehru University. He was arrested in 1975 during emergency. After that, he was elected as president of Student Union of Jawaharlal Nehru University. In the year 1978, he was elected as All India President of Student Federation of India. Since then, his political journey is a marathon. Currently, he is one of the most prominent MP of Rajya Sabha and respected by everyone on the floor across the political parties and ideology. In the current situation of Indian political diaspora, today we will listen to him. We will learn from his 5 decades long political life and we will try to understand what we can contribute as NRI for the oppressed and marginalized people of India. Over to
Thank you.
Comrade Yechury. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure to be hosted by all of you, and particularly today with Eid Mubarak to all my friends and all our colleagues. And thank you for this very flattering opening remarks you made, Som. So I'll try to be brief because I think there will be greater interest if we can have a longer Q&A session rather than a monologue from me. I've been asked by you all to speak on the post-corona India and the challenges that are there and how the struggle will continue for against sectarianism, against revisionism, and for maintaining and consolidating what all of us have always cherished, and that is the idea of India. That is a pluralistic society bringing together in an inclusive way the entire diversity that constitutes India, one of the richest in terms of social diversities in the world anywhere. And in order to preserve that, what needs to be done? But what shape India will take or the world will take post this COVID pandemic is already being shaped during the pandemic. And everywhere globally, you find a rightward shift in politics. You find a very, very strong authoritarian tendencies among the current rulers in almost every country in the world. And this tendency has got a very anti-democratic content. And this is something that is going to stay with us post this pandemic. And hopefully we'll be over this pandemic soon. Well, according to scientific an understanding so far, unless we get a sure enough vaccine, and even that is difficult because this pathogen is continuously mutating. So how we'll arrive at that we'll have to see. But right now, the whole world and humanity is going through a period of crisis. But within the crisis, the seeds are being laid for what will be the future. And I'm not going to talk so much about the world now. You are all aware of the situation in the USA. The only thing we can take some pleasure in India is to compare between Trump and Modi as to saying that who is doing worse or who is doing more of a knee-jerk reaction than what it is. I mean, that is the sort of a thing that is going on currently in the social media. But that apart, the whole way in which this pandemic was sought to be met, this entire danger in India has been fraught with lots of shortcomings and a lot of problems that are laying the foundations for a India that will emerge after this pandemic. And what are these? One was that we imposed a lockdown. We are going through a lockdown now, the last week of a 2-month lockdown. And in fact, almost 2 months are over. They'll be over tomorrow, and it'll continue for a week after that. And this lockdown began when we had only 10 deaths in India. Now we have more than nearly 3,000 odd deaths that have gone, and more than 1 lakh, 100,000, positives that have been registered. And the last 4 days, it's been growing very much. So what was required during the pandemic to actually augment our health facilities, protect our health workers, and equip ourselves with what is required with masks, ventilators, sanitizers, etc. Unfortunately, this was not done. We have an abysmally low hospital space in India. There are 0.8 beds for 1,000 people. There are 0.7 doctors for 1,000 people. And if this pandemic spreads like it's spreading now, it is going to be a very, very serious problem, and which has already begun to show. And along with it, the manner in which the lockdown came created social and economic problems. There are now millions of labor who have moved from other parts of India to different parts for their employment opportunities. They are naturally seeking to go back home. The lockdown came with a 4-hour notice, so they had no time to return back to their places. They are now crowding everywhere. For 2 months, they've been walking on the streets, the most inhuman sort of a tragedy that we have witnessed in India. And they are the danger of community spread there. They're all herding together, living together. Now, that is one problem. The economy has gone into a tailspin like everywhere else in the world, but it's worse because Indian economy was in a tailspin already before the pandemic emerged. And during this lockdown of these 2 months, there have been about 140 million people who lost their jobs. 140 million. And 8 out of 10 in the urban centers have lost their jobs. Now they have no money to live. Now people like us and many parties, 22 parties of the opposition yesterday met, came together, and what we had been articulating, what I had been articulating, the CPIM had been articulating, is immediately do some cash transfers to all those who do not pay any taxes. To those families, transfer at least 7,500 a month. I believe that's happening in the USA to those who have lost their jobs or to some category of people. I don't know that you are aware of it, but no such cash transfer scheme has happened. We said distribute free food grain. 77 million tons of food grain are there in our reserve stock. 77 million tons. We can feed every hungry person. Distribute them free for people for the next 6 months so that people don't die out of hunger and starvation and malnutrition. And hunger, starvation, malnutrition is the ideal ground, fertile ground for the pandemic, to this pathogen to spread. But that has not happened. Arrange transportation for these people who are now on the roads, walking for 2 months. And now the heat wave has begun in India. So it's going to be more miserable. Now do that and arrange free transportation. We got no dearth of trains and railway lines, but that is not happening. But this period is being used to also implement what I would say the real agenda that has been going on in India for some time now. All those have taken up virulent forms. Now this 20 lakh crore, as it is, that's 2 million. 2 million crores. That is 20 lakh, 2 million crores. When that works out to how much? 2 trillion. Indian rupees worth of economic stimulus was offered, out of which most of it is repackaging. And actual stimulus is less than 1% of our GDP. That is completely insufficient. But in the process, what has happened? The complete privatization of India's public sector and public services. And this is actually the loot of our national assets. And FDI, that is foreign direct investment, will get automatic entry into every field, including interstellar space travel, atomic energy. At this time, well, all these things have been opened up. That is precisely the neoliberal agenda, which has been a failure all over the world. That is being pursued with greater vigor, accompanied by an attack on the rights of the working people, the working class, the abolition of the labor laws. And that is happening within this period of pandemic and the lockdown so that nobody can protest. And in that sort of a situation, you find this is one agenda that's being pursued. The other is what we call in India, the sharpening of communal polarization. All the people who have been protesting against the Citizenship Amendment Act and those various things, peaceful protests, constitutionally guaranteed right of protest, they are being picked up through a communal profiling, the religious minorities primarily, and they are being detained under very draconian laws that India has enacted during these years. And this is also leading up to an oppression of any expression of dissent. So what we are seeing today, in the name of fighting the pandemic, the seeds of a future society and a future order are being laid. And that is a totalitarian surveillance state saying that we have to monitor who is positive, who is negative, who is getting in touch with whom. So the privacy is completely shattered and gone. And on the other hand, all expression of dissent and every person who dares to oppose the particular policies of this government is either booked under law or detained and put under very, very stringent draconian provisions of the law. So this is what is continuously happening during this period of this lockdown. And at the same time, the question of demographic transition in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir has been under a lockdown since August 2019. This lockdown has come on top of that lockdown. There are now thousands of people still detained in the state, including a former chief minister. We're saying you release them. No, but the idea was that the only Muslim majority state in India is demographic composition to be changed so that it no longer remains a Muslim majority state. Well, these can be debated, but this is not the time when you are under a lockdown, when there is no alternate opinion that can be given, that you are pushing through this agenda. Therefore, what is likely to emerge post-lockdown in India would be a more virulent form of what we have already been seeing pre the pandemic. And that is, you'll have a very strong sharpening of the of communal polarization. You'll have a very strong arm tactics against any expression of dissent. You will have the entire abrogation of democratic rights, civil liberties, and the labor laws and the rights enshrined in the Indian Constitution today. And at the same time, you will have a centralization of authority. India is a federal structure. The states have, I mean, virtually an equal role. Remember, the first article in the Indian Constitution talks of India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. The rights of the states, that is being, eroded today. I mean, you see this lockdown, the migrant labor had to go onto the roads, etc. Now, after 2 months, the central government tells the state governments, it's your baby. You have to look after them. No money given to the state governments. Even the legitimate dues are not being released. And at the other hand, you have thousands and thousands of millions and billions being collected in a private trust fund under the name of the Prime Minister. We are saying legitimately transfer these funds to the states. They are on the front line of this battle of combating this pandemic. But that is not being done. So centralization of authority. And that is leading to the undermining of all independent institutions under our constitution. So you have this money that is being collected through various devious means. During elections, we saw the electoral bonds as a mechanism through which billions of rupees was collected, unaccountable, unauditable, nobody knows. Like this private trust fund now, in which money is going, unauditable, unaccountable, non-transparent. Now, this is a sort of a loot that is taking place in mega corruption. Now, this is something whether it is going to, rob further the national assets of our country. So what we find now is actually the incapacitization of the independent institutions, whether it's the parliament itself, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the election commission, whether it is all other institutions of the state, like the CBI, etc., Central Bureau of Investigation, etc. So you are moving towards a centralized unitary state structure based on a totalitarian surveillance. And that is based again on a communal polarization that is meant to divide the harmony and unity of India, which is the exact antithesis of the concept of the idea of India that I had explained to you earlier. I spoke about it earlier. Now, the question that comes up is, how do we resist this? Because what you would ask me to speak on is, what will be the resistance in the post-pandemic period? Now, that resistance, in a sense, began yesterday against this abolition of the labor laws and this annulment that has been happening in a unilateral manner. All the central trade unions, barring the one affiliated to the ruling party, barring that one, all of them have joined together and joined into a protest action. Many were arrested, even under the lockdown conditions, and where no distancing is maintained. I personally am against this concept called social distancing. It is not social distancing. It is physical distancing with social solidarity. Social distancing means that there is also a social non-solidarity. And that is something we can't afford. Humanity as one will have to fight this pandemic, not divided. Then we are weaker. So what is emerging in India today is that the big people's resistance will be built up post the pandemic. Naturally will be, because people's lives have been ruined. And I'm talking of millions and hundreds of millions of people. It's not a small country, 1.3 billion people. And in 1.3 billion people, if you have an unemployment rate that is touching close to 30%, you can imagine the sort of a social upheaval that will take place. And in this situation, you also have the social discrimination that is inherent in India and that is coming down from centuries. The marginalized, the oppressed, our indigenous communities, whom we call tribals in India, they are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this. And here the question is that these sections will inevitably come together to face the post-pandemic uh, India and the Indian situation, and it will be a period of intense people's struggles, people's mobilizations, and the government's resistance against that. So I see a situation where there is in the global movement towards the right, in the global background of whether it's Bolsonaro in Brazil or whether it's your own president, or you have Erdogan in Turkey, or you have, various such names can be taken out in various countries. The movement is to use this lockdown period to strengthen your grip and centralization of authority. And in India, it ties in with another larger agenda, which is the agenda that this BJP government, as the political arm, BJP is nothing but the political arm of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, whose conception of India, is a rabidly intolerant, fascistic, theocratic country based essentially only for the Hindus. Now, it was the Hindus, a majority of the Hindus, who created the secular democratic India. It was a majority of the Hindus who came together to put together this constitution. Ambedkar was a Dalit who was the chairman of the drafting committee of this constitution. And all the castes that were involved in India in the Constituent Assembly came together and created this vision of an idea of India. That is being today wanted to be metamorphosed into their concept of a rabidly intolerant, theocratic, fascistic India. Whichever name they may call it, Hindutva Rashtra or whatever it is. But that is the complete antithesis of this idea of India. Now, this is the larger battle that will take place post-COVID in the situation in India. And there, we expect all of you. I'm very happy to see this Global Indians for a Progressive Alliance that you have formed, and the organization saying Hindus for global rights. I mean, my friend whom I had, he says we briefly met at Videlbhai Patel House. Am I right? That's where it was.
Hindus for Human Rights, sir.
Yeah. Hindus for Human Rights. Wonderful. I'm so glad, Mr. Raju, that I could meet you once again, and meet you in the sense through this medium of communication. And I'm glad that all of you have come together, because we require in India, we'll require, from facing all these problems, a lot of solidarity. This solidarity is what we require. Material form is not so much that I'm emphasizing on, but this solidarity, because we were born in an India that was a secular, democratic republic. We, and this generation, is not, we have not witnessed to the trials of the partition or the long transmigration of human beings that took place then. Today, we are witnessing a similar transmigration of human beings, which I think is unprecedented in peacetime anywhere in the world. And that is the situation with its tragic proportions that will have to be met, resolved. And the whole defining aspect of post-COVID India would be that of maintaining, strengthening, safeguarding the constitutional Republic of India, its secular democratic foundations, and the four fundamental foundational pillars of it. That is secular democracy, the social justice, federalism, and economic independence, integration, self-sufficiency. These four are under threat. That is what we have to battle. And that is where you were asking me, what do I expect from all of you? I expect a solidarity for the India that all of us were born in. And that India has to be safeguarded. So I think I'll leave my speaking there, and I think take on a lot of whatever you may want to ask me, because I think that is what will make it more interesting. Well, one is coming from Devashish Ghosh, saying that do CPM have any plan to launch any media channel to make people aware of the facts? Yes, that is one aspect I didn't touch on when I was speaking, and that is the complete corporate control and ownership of the media. Unlike, let's say, in the USA, unlike in Australia, where there are very strict laws on the cross-holding of media houses, newspapers cannot have television channels, and the other way around. But in India, all of them come under mostly, and I think overwhelmingly, under corporate control. And when corporate control and politics come together, we know, we only read history in the 1930s in the world after the Great Depression, what happened, which led to the situation and developments in Europe. And then it had to end only with the Second World War. When business and politics gets integrated, it's a dangerous situation. So CPIM has a media channel. We have about 6 daily papers today in various languages. And we have one television channel in the state of Kerala. And in others, we are struggling in this world of corporate business and the nexus between the businessman, the politician, and the bureaucrat, how to break this through. But that is something which is our, not merely a desire, but an objective which we want to fulfill. Now, Sirish Gupta has said one of the largest machines which the communal and progressive forces have used is the use of social media consistently to feed fake information to and brainwash the masses, to polarize them. What should be the progressive plan to counter that, given that we don't have a massive IT cell on our payroll? Very correct. That is a big, shortcoming for the opposition in India, particularly the left. Well, the other opposition parties who are much richer than the left, they ought to play a role, which I think they are now slowly waking up to play the role. But please understand, we are also facing a gigantic machine that is making money through all forms and means. I only gave you an example of the electoral bonds in the past, and now this private trust. Imagine after the terrorist attack at Pulwama, when it was followed up with Balakot, which came fortuitously for the current ruling party before the elections. And that was something, for that a fund was created. It was in Hindi, it was called Bharat Ke Veer, the heroes of India. And that was again a private trust, and we don't know how much of money went actually to the families of the martyrs. Nothing is transparent, nothing is accountable. So they have the control over resources of such a big order that the opposition finds it very, very difficult. But it has to change. So the answer is, therefore, finally the people. Finally the people. The people and the people's resistance and the people's movements and people's solidarity through popular struggles. That is the answer, and that is what we are going to try and strengthen. If we are to shift to a communist state, is there a transition plan in place? Jatin Tiwari, I think. Well, shifting to a communist state will come only when we first move towards the socialist state. The socialist state would mean, first of all, to replace the existing capitalist state. That capitalism is not going to voluntarily abandon its control over the society or its state power. That is something we'll all have to work out in the concrete conditions of each country, how that will take place. And we are in that stage now where we have to resist first the attacks on our rights. And in that sense, we are in a defensive phase of struggle where we are trying to protect what we already have. And then we have to move towards a stage of a struggle where we can mount the assault on the rule of capital. And this is precisely what you're seeing, even during this period of the pandemic and the lockdowns in various countries in the world. In where you are now living, in the USA, your 10 billionaires, richest people, I believe, have added something to the tune of nearly $300 billion to their wealth during this period. Now, where did this come from? Unless exploitation has intensified even further. So these are the conditions in which we are living in. So first, defending our rights, then strengthening our struggles to mount the assault on capital. That is the phase in which we are in. Now, Halima Khan, I completely agree with you on distinction between social and physical distancing. So cruel. Maybe it's spell check has to be gone through. So anyway, thank you very much for giving us. Social solidarity with physical distancing is the better approach. What plans do you have to ally with opposition parties to counter the BJP behemoth? Yes, we are aligning on issues. Yesterday, for the first time in these 2 months of this lockdown, we had a virtual meeting of 22 leaders, as I mentioned, and that was a good beginning. We adopted a common statement. We adopted a common charter of demands that we have made on this government. This government has got a unique distinction of not being responsive to anything that the opposition raises. So therefore, all the letters that I have addressed to the President of India, to the Prime Minister, not one of them, forget being answered, has not even been acknowledged as being received. So that is where it's against a wall. So we have put this demand, they're there before the people, they're there before the country, they're there before the government. And I think in the days to come, this coming together of the opposition parties, 22 parties yesterday, there are some for various reasons, some few, I mean 3-4 of them for various reasons who did not attend. I'm sure in the days to come, they will also join. And we'll try to bring together as many as possible to have a common voice in resolving people's problems while single-mindedly combating this pandemic. My great appreciation, Sitaramji, for your succinct presentation. This is Mr. Raju Rajagopal. We at the Hindus for Human Rights hope to continue this conversation with you in the coming months. Thank you. Surely, Mr. Raju. Mr. Raju Rajagopal, surely I'll continue with it. It'll be my pleasure also. And as I said, I at least highly value and honor your solidarity from wherever you are. And I think all Indians all over the world will have to today keep up our great, I would say one of the greatest syncretic civilizations that emerged in human civilization. That is why some years ago when BBC ran its mega, or what it called the epic history series, he says the only civilization without a break, the Greeks had a break, the Romans had a break, the Egyptians had a break, maybe China is the only other comparable one, but the only civilization which is syncretic of this nature, which without a break that continued for more than 2,000 years was Indian history. Now that was because everybody, in Sanskrit we call it Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This is the home for everyone. And if you break that India is gone. And that is what we have to preserve. So your solidarity is most, I look forward to it. Thank you, Mr. Raju. Yes, sir. Now any more? What do you say, Som? Or do you want to continue the chat?
Yes.
Devalina, also, what are your, you're some more coming in, yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions to you, actually.
Okay.
Abroad, yeah.
Okay, now let me shift through.
Yeah. So I think we can, if you like, we can read you the questions if that's comfortable more. So we can.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It's fine.
So one question we have is, it says the Kerala model has attracted a lot of attention in the global media. Can you tell us something about on the ground reality, and if it is indeed a success, it seems?
Yes.
What are the hopes for Parling this success into getting more buy-in to this model from the middle class that has largely been influenced by the neoliberal propaganda machine? Thank you.
Yes, yeah. You see, as far as Kerala and Kerala model is concerned, you see, Kerala has this experience of earlier the Nipah virus when that broke out. Even the WHO and everybody else had to highly appreciate the manner in which Kerala could contain it. Now, why? You see, since the 1950s, the foundations of a public health system in Kerala were laid by the first communist government that came into existence in 1957. Public health, public education, food security. These were the three things in which Kerala emphasized. So often there's criticism, there's no industrial growth in Kerala, there's no economic growth. But Kerala achieved the highest levels of human development indices comparable to or even better than some of the European countries. That was because of these foundations that were laid. The human face of development was Kerala. And that has played a very big role in containing this pandemic. Now, let me tell you, what is the contrast between what Kerala is doing and what the rest of the country and the center is doing? On the 30th to 31st of December, the first of the cases appeared in Wuhan, or probably the first death occurred. Right then, preparations began in Kerala. Because a large number of our Kerala people are all over the world. You are aware of it. They're all over the world, and particularly in China. Also, there are many students and many businessmen who do small businesses, and particularly in Wuhan. So, anticipating that will be brought here, in January itself, preparations began. And by the 20th of January, all districts had control rooms. All of them had equipment ready for testing. All of them had hospital spaces. Hospital spaces were actually acquired. And many of the guest houses and things like that were acquired in order to create isolation wards. New doctors were appointed. And on the 25th, the entire thing was operational. And the first positive case emerged in Kerala on January 30. So by the time the first case emerged in Kerala, the entire setup was ready. So you could isolate, contain, you could do contact tracing. And each person who was found positive, meticulously the contact tracing was done. Only to illustrate the point, I tell you, there was this very touching incident in the graveyard where a dead body was being brought to be buried in the middle of the night. You had a doctor and two nurses waiting for the body to arrive. And when the media asked them, saying, "What are you doing here?" He said, "We are here to test whether the man died because of coronavirus or not. Because if he did, then his entire family, all the contacts, all those who came for the funeral, every one of them would be tested, isolated, and quarantined." So you had to move in this scientific manner. Now we have flattened the curve in Kerala. And that was possible only because there was a large scale people's participation, as always in Kerala. That is a unique thing, irrespective of whatever your differences. It's a highly political state. But when it comes to a problem that the people of Kerala have to face, they are all united. And they've shown that remarkably, once again, now community kitchens. Nobody went hungry. People could call certain numbers that were provided, saying that this is what I want in my house. We are two old age people. There's nobody to bring this to. Those used to be delivered. So like this, when you started taking care of every single person in Kerala, you flatten the curve. Now the new wave will begin. We are ready for that. And that new wave is when the travel has been opened up, when people will start coming from other countries into Kerala, other parts of India into Kerala. Now, each one of them is being not merely tested, but quarantined for 14 days and contact tracing being done. So, I mean, it's once again a new phase of the battle has begun. But I'm sure and confident that we'll be able to contain it. Now, if Kerala can do it, why can't the rest of India? The first case emerged on the 30th of January in Kerala. And then you had that great Namaste Trump that was organized in Ahmedabad with hundreds of thousands of people jam-packed into a stadium, brought in jam-packed buses and trains. And look at the city of Ahmedabad and look at Gujarat today. See how the pandemic is rising. And then you had the toppling of a government in Madhya Pradesh, elected government, and the open swearing in of the alternate BJP government. And now look at the situation in Madhya Pradesh. What is happening? So the period that we should have used, the month of February, in fact, month of January also, but even that, if you say first case appeared on 30th of January, so month of February, the month of March, till the 25th of March, nothing was done. And then abruptly you say lockdown without making any preparations. So that is why, Kerala model that was there obviously in front of everybody. Every single newspaper, including your Washington Post, New York Times, everyone carried front page photographs of it. Why? Because it can be done. And that is the point that I think we must realize. When they look at the world, in Vietnam, there's not been a single COVID death so far. It's got one of the longest borders with China, land borders. It managed. Wuhan, they managed. They're preparing for the new thing with universal testing of everybody. Cuba is sending medical teams to 50 odd countries in the world to tackle this. So where you have a social system where universal healthcare is there, that is the basis of the success. And that is where the Kerala model, I would suggest, is something that we can emulate in every part of India. And we should. And I think that's what should be done. And that's what not only me, not only my party, because we had the government in the state there, but everybody else, like yesterday's in the meeting of the opposition parties, everybody said that why are we not following what Kerala is doing? And instead of giving money to the states that are doing good work, you are denying them resources and pushing the burden of your decisions at the center onto them. That is what is the most unfortunate, unfair thing that is happening. Yes, Som, your next question.
I think Manish is reading out the question. Manish, what is the next one?
Okay, sure. So if you had already a question here, let's see here. I think the next question is, how do we generate a mass appeal for a secular India, social welfare, and a just society that captures people's fervor the same way the current polarized India has an appeal among the masses?
Well, the polarized India has an appeal amongst the masses today because when the cake size of the cake reduces, the scramble for the share of the cake intensifies. So this sort of a India that is an insular India and an exclusivist India, that grows up because you exclude the marginalized sections, the Dalits, the indigenous people, the tribals. You exclude the non-Hindus. Then you can preserve your share. That is where the appeal comes in. And that is the genesis for this appeal. Whatever be the subjective factors, whatever be the subjective appeals, whatever be the media control, whatever be the fake news on social media, but at the basis, at the ground, this is the feeling that, like your president, sorry my saying it, I don't want to offend anybody, but saying that the white Americans are unemployed because all these guys from India and other places have come and taken our jobs. So anti-immigrants, this thing, your racism, your xenophobia, all that grows because of that. That is the appeal. The manifestations are this communal polarization. But this is the foundation. Now that is what has to be tackled. That is when you can break this. And that would require an alternate economic agenda, which we as the left have. And now, after yesterday's meeting, I think slowly we are coming to some common ground with the other opposition also, saying that this alternative economic agenda needs to be put forward. So, but also remember, propaganda, communication, demagoguery can sustain for a little while. But when you're continuously hungry, when you're not able to feed your family, when a 16-year-old girl has to carry her aged father on a bicycle for days on end to reach home, cycling. That is a situation where no demagoguery will work. That is the thing where those issues have to be highlighted, picked up, and then people rallied and mobilized over that. And that, I think,
Okay,
is a fundamental thing.
right. Okay. Well, thank you. The next question says, I think partly you answered that, but how do you see a coalition coming together consisting of national and regional groups, considering that we are dealing with a gigantic propaganda machinery? And thank you,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you for being here today. That was the comment as well as the question.
Well, that is a comment, and that is ingrained in the appeal that I had to all of you, where I said I want your solidarity with it, because this is a gigantic fight. This is not an ordinary, one election or the other normal election that you have. We have issues right from the question of political funding, electoral bonds. We have an issues of this electronic voting machines. You have an issue now using this pandemic, using this lockdown. They are now talking of electronic voting.
Mhm.
People will vote through their emails. Now that is going to be a very, very dangerous thing of how it is going to happen or not. And
Right.
you have this community. So there are many, many issues that are involved. It's a gigantic battle, not only propaganda machine, but they have manipulated the system in such a way that it is only going to favor them.
Mhm.
Whether right from funding to the question of voting to the question of the machines that are used in counting of the votes to everything.
Mhm.
So this is a very, very big battle, and that is why your solidarity is important. And
Right.
therefore, I'm glad that you're also thinking in these lines. We all have
Right.
to work together, my dear.
Mhm.
That's the only
Right.
way to preserve India that we know.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that has actually brings the transition to the next question also on the similar lines. We recognize that BJP has polarized us for the over the last 6 years, particularly where we stand divided, many of us. However, despite those efforts, some people are not polarized even within the same households. The question is then how can we get more people like those who don't fall for lies and hate? Because that is the better defense against any divisive force. So how do we unite the people on this other side of the spectrum?
That is what it is. You are uniting
Right.
the people on the other side of the spectrum is drawing them together on their actual day-to-day issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it is precisely pushing the day-to-day issues into the background through the appeals of an emotional appeals of, let's say, a communal nationalist jingoism, which is what happened after the Pulwama and Balakot in the last election.
Correct.
For three years on a row, the working class, the working people, the peasantry, the agricultural workers, all of them were on the streets in huge, big mobilizations against the economic policy. But once such an incident was utilized to create this sort of a jingoism, an emotional appeal, all that goes into the background. Now that is where we'll all have to step in, saying that basically, finally, it is the bread and butter and survival issues. Now that is what has to be sustained. So you can break your heads within a family also between siblings, one taking one side and the other taking the other side. And but that is only when you have the comfort for that family to discuss these issues. Once there are increasingly more and more number of families who don't have this comfort to discuss these issues, then you see, and that situation is already begun. That situation is already begun, and now you'll see. I mean, so many cases of humanism in India today, during this entire crisis. The migrant workers don't have money to travel. A truck worker that is going there charges them exorbitantly. There was a story of how a Muslim driver, he asked them, "Do you have money?" They said, "No." He said, "Then come in." And it carried them for 600 kilometers on the Indian roads and dropped them home free. Now, I mean, such things have happened during the partition. The things have happened now. The essential humanism of an Indian remains. It is those who want to exploit it for their political purposes, they get away with creating this hatred. And that is where we'll all have to fundamentally join together. I lost your voice, Manish.
Manish, you need to unmute
Sorry.
yourself.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
now.
in the In the interest of time for everybody, we only have 10 more minutes left. We promised to Comrade Yechury that we will end in exactly 60 minutes. So just a heads up, we have another 10 minutes to wrap up the discussion.
Yeah.
So I will be taking a couple more questions here. The
Mm.
question that we have right now is, what are the strategies that you suggest in terms of dealing with the hate propaganda, given the amount of hate speeches and communal propaganda that you've already discussed? What are the strategies that people outside India should take uh, to counter that?
One,
I have
yeah,
sorry,
yeah, please.
I have a similar kind of question. I just want to club this. So
Mm.
apart from this huge communal propaganda around the social media, we are also seeing that in videos that even UP and Delhi police during this time, they are going to the minority areas and asking them to go to Pakistan and beating them like anything. Courts and not taking the cases. So how can we fight with how can we restore the democracy? Because these are like law and order is one of the biggest part of democracy, and we, the poor people and marginalized, oppressed people, are more dependent on law and order. So if they are
Yes.
oppressed, where would they go and how they will do the thing? So we need to restore this thing. So what could be the process?
Yes, you see the process that's what I told you, Som, that this is a very, very big battle. And we are up against a very, very formidable army. Now, the judicial system, the delivery of justice that has to be delivered, that itself is not doing its job, unfortunately. Very unfortunate. And what you said about the cases, this is happening in many of the states where the BJP has got state government. Where, as I told you at the outset, the real agenda, one of them was the communal profiling and arresting the victims of communal violence in Delhi before this pandemic came. The victims, the pandemic was already there before this lockdown came. The victims of the communal violence are the ones who are now being arrested because they all happen to be non-Hindus, minority Muslims. And for them, the lawyers and the lawyers collective, etc., who are come together to help these people, they are being arrested under these draconian laws, as I mentioned earlier, for expressing dissent. So it is actually a battle against the state. I mean, every Indian today who is not with the ruling party is the enemy of the state. When I was much younger, about more than 20 years ago, there was a film called The Enemy of the State. Gene Hackman and I think Bob Willis was there. Willis was there, your Men in Black fellow. I mean, actor. Uh, Bruce Willis. Not Bruce. Anyway,
Will Smith.
what about that?
Will Smith.
So and we thought it was such a fantastic futuristic thing, but now you see that happening in reality. How the state controls everything that you do, it's known. So it is a big battle. I mean, how you have to do is that we have to battle on at every stage, at the legal level, at the political level, at the level of social media. And what you can do against this fake news and propaganda is actually to put out the real news. And in India, we have what you call a Facebook page. It's called the Alt News, the alternative news, which checks on every single news and tells you whether it's fake or authentic.
Right.
And most of the news that was put up by these people have all turned out to be fake news. And you will have to help us from there in creating such platforms, such applications, such apps, whereby people can access to know what is the real truth.
Mhm.
And that is, I think, a very, very important area where you can be of great help to all of us in India.
Well, I do want to thank you for the shout out to Alt News. We actually had them yesterday as our first webinar guest as well. That was just about 24 hours before your shout out.
Okay, very good. Very
Yeah,
good. I'm
Pratik
so
Sinha
glad.
is there, was there
Yeah,
yesterday.
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't know this. I mean,
yeah. I'm sure he'll be flattered to hear your calling him out,
yeah.
giving a
No,
shout out. So thank you.
Pratik is doing a wonderful job, wonderful work.
Right.
Mm,
Right, right. So
mm.
the next question we have, it says that the communal politics has worked extremely well for BJP, and the constant propaganda machine has so far ensured that BJP is on its way to lead in 2024 without any clear, strong opposition in public minds. How do you think a credible opposition be put forth electorally? And what are your pragmatic bets for 2024?
Well,
That's a very good.
I'm very good question, but at the same time, I'm actually appreciate the optimism of the questioner. In the sense, I mean, you only hope that till 2024 nothing will happen. You know, that things will happen. We'll only go in for the next election. That is being, in
Right.
my opinion, very, very optimistic. 2022 is 75 years of India's independence. And that is the
Mhm.
benchmark that is being targeted for some very, very radical fundamental changes. This pandemic and this lockdown and all that will be used in order to now their elections to some state assemblies forthcoming. We don't know whether they'll be held or not. If they are not held, whether there'll be some attempt to club the national election along with the state election. Remember, one of the slogans of Modi was "One country, one election."
Mhm.
If that were to come, so what is going to come till 24? That's why I said very optimistic. I'm so glad that you have this optimism. I wish, I mean, from India we can share that optimism fully, but there are all indications that things will not go according to the textbook. Things will not happen according to the book. There are indications, and we are fighting that they should. But let us see. I mean, how it will turn out. But then the point is, what is the credible alternative? Credible alternative is back on the real day-to-day issues of the people with the opposition can get together and come. Unfortunately, in 2019, we tried our best, but that didn't happen. Now that should not happen. What happened in 2019 should not happen by the time of the next election. I think it's in the interest of every single opposition party. Those who today think they're comfortable in alliance with the ruling BJP. You see, the history of the BJP in the past has always been no ruling party has survived. They are either absorbed into the BJP, they become part of it, or
Mhm.
they are just discarded out. So therefore, they should also learn from that experience. But a pragmatic
Mhm.
manner in which this unification will have to come has to come. Remember, in Europe in the 1930s, fascism grew because such pragmatism didn't exist, and they utilized these divisions for their advantage. We shouldn't allow that to happen in India.
Mhm.
That's what we are trying. We'll do our
Right.
best,
Right. Uh,
and we
and
wish you, yeah,
I was just gonna say that you have our solidarity in all,
that's it.
100%.
That's
So on that note, I know we're running just about 2 minutes into 11:30, so I'll
yeah,
just take last question, and then we will do our closing remarks. The question is from Commodore Batra. He's an expert on
yeah.
filing a lot of RTIs with the government. You're probably familiar with the name. It says it's 36 months since the parliamentary committee in May 2017 started discussing on issues of electoral reforms. Election Commission in their submission to parliamentary committee included adverse impacts of electoral bonds and foreign funding. The question is what are the opposition parties can do to expedite parliamentary committee to finalize its report on electoral reforms? And that was the last
Yes,
question of the day.
yeah. Commodore Batra, wonderful to see you face to face. I mean, we have been in communication through the WhatsApp, etc., but I've never been able to see him. Wonderful to see you, comrade. Commodore, I'm sorry, I call you comrade, but you're Commodore. But anyway, I hope you. There's a sheer mistake out of habit. So,
It's honor
you
for
see,
me too.
but Commodore, that there's a case that I have filed which is still pending in the court, asking for the scrapping of these bonds. That I said this is illegal, this should be scrapped. That case is still pending. When the honorable judges of the court will decide to hear. Unfortunately, in India, the case against one TV anchor of one channel is more important than hearing cases like electoral bonds or the Article 370 or human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. So, what is the court's priorities? That itself tells you a bigger story. That's a part. That apart, in the Parliamentary Standing Committee, when it was formed at our insistence when I was still there in the Rajya Sabha then, in the 2017 for larger electoral reforms, the Election Commission's view on both electoral bonds and foreign funding was something that we upheld. And we are of the opinion that we are working, and our members in the parliamentary committee we have already taken the position, will continue to press for the position, scrap electoral bonds and scrap the retrospective amendments to the FCRA Act, whereby you allowed foreign companies to donate to Indian political parties with retrospective effect. Both these things we are very, very clear and firm. And please continue doing your good work. And they have been very helpful for our campaigns in India. And in fact, I've added much of the material that you have managed to collect through your RTI interventions as case material for my case in the court. So thank you for that. Please continue that work. That'll be very useful for us.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you very much. At this point, we are right on time, so I do want to take the opportunity to thank Comrade Yechury ji for taking the time out of his busy schedule. He's one of the busiest, politicians, a legendary one names for us. We are absolutely honored and delighted to host him. So thanks again, and thanks to Som also for persistently pursuing with him to get him aboard.
Yes.
So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's thanks to Dave, Lisa, Dinu for working behind the scenes also in pulling this together. So at this point, we will just say our formal thanks and call the meeting adjourned at 11:32.
Let me say my thanks also, Manish.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Please.
Let me thank all of you, your backup team, you, Som, and thank you very much. It has been a wonderful, pleasant experience as far as I'm concerned, and I hope that we'll continue with these interactions. And
so thank you so much for coming, and for people who are
thank you
interested
particularly,
in following our
Som.
activities.
I'm saying about Som, he was very, very persistent, doggedly persistent, and then he managed to get the data.
Yeah, so sorry that I disturbed you a lot.
No, fine, no problem. I'm complimenting you.
Yeah.
That's a very good quality.
Yeah.
Right. See, we believe that when all else fails, persistence prevails. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
but a lot of persistence is needed. Like the thing we are going through, a lot of persistence is needed to
absolutely.
So
absolutely.
And
so all the best to all of you there. All the best to all of you there, and keep persisting.
Right. And we also like to thank at this point for participants for joining and for being such a great audience. This is something that we've always been concerned about, having a great pool of people to have an intellectual conversation. And so thank you everyone for cooperating with our measures and being on board. For how you can follow us, we post a lot of things on facebook.com/GIP Alliance. Similarly, twitter.com/GIP Alliance. So you can reach on, connect with us, and follow with our future webinar activities and future advocacy work that we do, that we're trying to do as an organization. And at this point, thank you again. Eid Mubarak to all, and have a great weekend. Thank you again so much, Shri. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye to all of you. Bye.
Thank you.